Hello and welcome to AviaDev Insight Africa, the podcast offering a window to the world of African aviation with your host, Jon Howell, CEO and founder of AviaDev Africa. Back in 2021, at the height of the pandemic, my guest today reached out as they were putting together the first text on route development and wanted to cover the role of events in supporting the route development ecosystem. That text is now out. It is called Strategies for Sustainable Route Development. And I was absolutely honored and delighted to contribute a chapter on the role of events. Today, we're going to find out a little bit more about the book, about who it's for, what it's all about. And I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by the two editors of the book, and they are the architects as well, of course, bringing together all of the contributors. So that is Chrystal Zhang, who is the Associate Professor of Aviation at RMIT University in Melbourne, and Dr. Kareem Yarde, a recipient of a PhD from RMIT University, and who now serves as an air transport and tourism consultant. So welcome to the podcast, both of you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jon, for inviting us.
It's great to have you with us, and a truly global podcast today because Chrystal is joining us from Australia and Kareem is in the Caribbean. So we're spanning the time zones, although none of us are in Africa. I'm about probably the closest to the continent. Let's start with both yourself and also, of course, your backgrounds as well. Chrystal, what prompted you to get involved in this book? What is your background when it comes to aviation?
Thank you, Jon, for having me. It's really my great pleasure. As you introduced me and also Kareem. So Kareem did his PhD with me back a few years ago in RMIT in Australia. And I have to mention that one of the really key reasons for Kareem to choose doing his PhD with me is because, according to him, he said I have industry experience, and that's very true. One of my highlights of my career was working for the Route Development Group, based in Manchester in the UK, and also I was the head of their China operation. I actually established their China office. So I have that kind of a passion of supporting the airline and airport community to develop the route, and also supporting all the tourism authorities and all the communities, the stakeholders, because we do understand the significance of the air transport development, how it contributes to the economic development and the growth. So that's where the passion comes from. And when Kareem working together with me, that we come up with the idea that there's something that is meeting for the industry practitioners and also the researchers to understand how exactly this works. That's how the idea came into alive. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, we don't normally mention the Roots group on this, but we're both alumni from Root. That's great. And yeah, it was lovely for you to reach out. And yeah, Kareem, tell us about you getting involved in this as well.
Sure. Thanks so much, Jon. As Chrystal mentioned, I'm originally from the Caribbean, Barbados specifically, and it was a long way away. So going to Australia to have done the PhD under tutelage, but it was certainly very insightful. And essentially, what had drove me in that direction is that being from the Caribbean, there's always this perception that the region, and I mean, it's a reality, the region is often challenged by a lot of leadership from tourism organizations engaging with airlines by nature of our dependence or heavy dependence on tourism. And our DMOs would tend to take the lead in that regard. And that's in stark contrast, as you would appreciate, what happens globally, whereas in many regards, the airports have taken that leadership role. For me, one of the critical things was to help investigate how we could assist those organizations to work more effectively in a collaborative way so that they can achieve benefits for the society at large, because that is at the end of the day what development is about, creating the access that benefits all of those in society. And so there's little advantage to operating in the siloed ways that the industry tends to currently function. And so we wanted to break down those barriers, and I think that we've started the path in that regard. And so that's what essentially brought us there today.
Amazing. Yeah, I think you've touched on some great points that we'll elaborate on shortly. But yeah, absolutely. It's a team effort. And I think the really interesting thing that we alluded to at the beginning is that obviously as a discipline, route development is relatively new, and it's grown in coordination with liberalization of markets and the ability to have this kind of free market approach to where routes can begin. So I think that was a question I wanted to ask you, Chrystal, is the book itself, is it research and theory based, or is it more case study and industry driven?
That's a very good question, I think, John, because we as academia, we are always driven by the academic scholarly vigorous. So whatever we do is a kind of a research underpinned by the theory. But on the other hand, we really want to have an impact. We want to have our research output to be translated into practical, very useful industry practices. For this book, I would say through the joint efforts of Kareem and me, and all the contributors is definitely underpinned by the theory, but with very practical implications. We do include quite some case studies, the very successful case studies of root development to ensure that we can demonstrate how the theoretical framework can be translated into the best practice to share that with the industry.
Yeah, yeah, great answer. And having obviously read the book, I can attest to that very much, that there is this nice mix of that theory base, but also the practicality side. And as I say, it's a discipline that's sort of 30 years old, not really much older than that. And Kareem, in terms of who the book is for, who do you think this would be useful for in terms of their everyday application?
Yeah, I think to the initial point, because we've had a challenge where the industry operates in such a siloed ways, to begin with, it's really useful for practitioners. At the end of the day, it wasn't written with the intent of being overly academic, so to make it very digestible and to ensure that persons can apply it in a very practical sense. And so one of the things you will notice, there's a chapter, for example, that speaks about or it introduces a framework as to how you can essentially create value in this process of their service development. And it provides a number of different tactics and strategies, hence the title for the book. Strategies that can be practically applied to assist all of these stakeholders. Specifically, when we're speaking about those involved, you will speak about the air service development practitioners at the airports themselves. That's obviously a core audience. Beyond that, as I'd indicated, particularly and using the Caribbean as an example, there are tourism practitioners who are leading in this charge in the Caribbean, and it creates the exposure for them, which they presumably and in many regards don't necessarily have at the outset. And we can transpose that not only on a geographical scale, but across divisions which are involved. Practically, you can have industry associations, which are business associations, which participate. And so in many regards, you will have airport stakeholders distilling all of that information and taking it to the airline, or at least that is the hope and the intent. They will distill that information and take it to the airline to make an argument. But if they're not necessarily being guided effectively by other stakeholders who can effectively contribute to that process, the key question is that how does that undermine and affect the overall ability to convince the airline? And so what we want to do fundamentally is to ensure that all of those stakeholders can call upon that information and can rely upon it in a way that then positions the destination, broadly speaking, to be able to achieve that ultimate goal.
Yeah, great way to put it. I think the point is that all of these destinations need a team approach, but they also need a leader, be that the DMO, be that the airport company, somebody that's going to galvanize everybody together. So their job is to say, we're going to take the lead, but we want you to coalesce with us. We want you to understand the value. And actually, this is a framework. These are some of the things that you can be aware of. And that's where we've seen the biggest success, is where there has been not an individualistic siloed approach. You used that term earlier, which I think is something that we encounter all the time in the African market, for example, that where you can see the benefit of looking at this from a regional or a national perspective and everybody being together and wanting to share in that success, so that when you approach an airline, you arrive with a united front rather than everybody trying to pull away and have an individual conversation for their own benefit. And that all that does is it actually erodes trust with the airline. They get very, very confused about who's in charge and what direction are we taking this. And that's the feedback I get in the industry for sure. Chrystal, to come back to you in terms of the contributor side of things as well, give us an overview of who you brought together.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we were very lucky and really honored to have fantastic contributors to the book. And one of the criteria we actually have when we decide who to choose to contribute to the book is taking into account the points that we have just made, because through our research, we realized it's not just the airport who is taking the lead in this route development process. every continent, or even within the continent, every country is so different. So we want to capture that kind of a dynamics in that root development process. And taking that into account, we really have a strong feeling that the contributor to the book needs to have a very good, comprehensive, insightful understanding of how the root development has been carried out across the different kind of continents, and how dynamic the market is, whether it is led by the airport itself, the tourism authority, the other business development authorities, etc., etc. We were so delighted, really privileged to have a list of contributors, be the academia working in the university who have the expertise in understanding the market, doing the theoretical work, all those people, the industry professionals, the practitioners who have years of decades of experience working in that particular area and who are so willing, supportive in the whole process to support us in this. Just to give you the few names who are supporting us throughout this process. So we have Dr. Darren Ellis from Cranfield University. We have Dr. Edgar Jimenez Perez, who is also a senior lecturer in Cranfield University. We have Professor Ahmed Abdghani, who is a professor in Abu Rido University, who also has industry experience. We have Mr. Alistair Long, who has years of experience working as a solicitor in the airline industry, very experienced, and we are so lucky to have him contributing to one of the chapters on the legal aspect of that operation. We also have Gavin Eccles, who is also an academia but also a consultant, a renowned consultant advising the tourism authorities to the African, to the European organizations. And also we have Miguel Perez, who is based in Spain, who shares with us the best practice of how a regional smaller airport can be successful in attracting the airlines to serve the region. And of course, we have the greatest honor to have you, John, yourself, to contribute to a chapter. So we feel like we were so honored to have so many brilliant contributors working with the university as academia or as a practitioner with insightful knowledge about the practice of root development. Yeah, we are very thankful for their support.
And it really is a sort of who's who of, and a real mix. And I was amazed, the best minds in the best universities, when you hear the names Embry-Riddle and Cranfield, it's a real testament. And of course, your university over there in Melbourne is really well respected as well. What about you, Kareem? Any particular highlights from particular favorite chapter, or is that, are you not allowed to do that as the editor?
I wouldn't want to give any reference to anything specifically. Just to reiterate again, we're truly honored to have the participation of one of our contributors. It really added a lot of depth value to what we believe we're able to produce. On the one hand, you do have, yes, the academic influence. Again, our intention was not necessarily to make it overly academic. We wanted it to be able to be relied upon by those in industry. And to be quite honest, we tend to know how things get when things become too academic. And I tend to detract away from the industry person being able to take it up and run with it very effectively. To that extent, that was the goal. One thing I do wanted to mention, if you'll allow me, John, back with respect to the essence of the book, really. So when we speak about the notion of value and how we interpret that, and again, this is to showcase the application of the theory in the practical sense. So yes, we'd applied a framework which was developed by other authors, essentially within a different domain, but we'd taken that framework and applied it to their service development context. And so we're able to deduce in different ways the avenues that you can rely upon to make contributions to airlines that airlines would see in a real substantive sense. But the critically important thing there is, for us, we are looking at this as a destination and we're thinking this route is fundamentally important to me. But we must also appreciate that the airline has a litany of other routes that also has to make a determination about. And so it's, from the destination's viewpoint, certainly its own obligation to try to convince, but at the same time, we appreciate that there is utility for the airline in the information that it brings to the table. And so when we speak about the involvement of those other stakeholders, that's where a lot of that actually comes from you're making contributions by way of resources. In some regards, their destinations who are contributing the marketing funds and so on. But at the end of the day, those are the kind of on the surface level, those are the things you would see as being contributory factors. But you could appreciate that being associated with specific entities, there's value that can come from that. And that kind of association would then be able to be transferred into different marketing activities and so on, to be able to bring your network into the process, to be able to call upon the customer bases of those respective entities and so on. So that's the fundamental and central point we want to bring to the table. There's value in the integration of different stakeholders. I want to ensure that persons don't lose sight of that, and that each destination, because it is unique in its various attributes, the more effectively you can call upon those individualistic and idiosyncratic avenues, better it positions you with the firm understanding that you're competing against the world. And the final thing I'll mention is in that process, you really would appreciate that an airline not only has a litany of routes, also has a very limited number of assets. And so it has to be able to then distribute that constrained set of assets across a broad base of opportunities, right? So for destinations, it's how do you strike that balance?
Yeah, and that was never an issue when we wrote the chapters in the book. There was oversupply and there was an aircraft flying around. And then you look at today, and that's what I think we all love about the aviation industry is how quickly it can move. And now you've got a complete lack of supply of metal in the market and this continued pressure. But actually, this lends itself as much as the previous did to having to work hard to get these aircraft to fly to your destination. Now we have to work harder than ever to say, I need to be in that top echelon that the airlines want to serve my destination. And I think your point you made are great, but it's that liberalization has created the opportunity for competition. And what that has then created is this ability to influence those decision makers, which of course is what happens at AviaDev every year in an African context, where, you know, the airports and the airlines and the tourist boards come to negotiate, come to influence in a fair way within the rules. And I just want to make a special note for my really good friend, Miguel, because I've worked with Valencia. We did some AviaDev events down there pre-pandemic as well. You know, what he's done and what they have done as a collective to position Valencia with the destinations that they have is just incredible, really, for what it's done for the region. And you can actually see the impact. You can see the investment. You can see the job creation and all of the opportunities in that region itself. That is the beauty of the book, is it does show the results, not just the theory. And that's what I really wanted to be part of. I didn't want to be part of something that's just theory based. Let's hope for the best. Let's not really understand all of the niches and the nuances. But I think you've done a great job of putting it all together. So I think on behalf from myself and all the other chapter contributors, a huge thank you to both of you for putting this together into a really compelling text that I'm sure everybody will enjoy reading. So thank you both for being with us today. It's been great to find out a bit more about the book.
Thank you,
Thank
John.
you very much for having us. Yeah.
Fantastic. So the book is now available on the Routledge website. So there will be a link in the show notes. You can go straight to the page. You can order your copy of the book. It's available in paperback and hardback as well. If there's somebody in your network you think would benefit from having a read and knowing a little bit more, then share this podcast, go to the website, read the kind of the overview, the preface, the understanding of the different contributors as well and their expertise. Because I think even if you've been in this game for some time or you're new, you will get value from this text because it does rely on decades of experience. And I think that's the exciting part, is the discipline may be 30 years old, but the expertise that the editors have brought together here is multiple decades of expertise across so many industries, so many continents. And it's the most complete work of its type at this stage, and something I've been incredibly proud to be part of. We will be back for the next episode very soon. Go and click on that link and go and have a look at the book, and we'll speak to you very soon. Thanks for joining us. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right.